All right, guys, welcome again. A quick reminder that at the end of the week we have the book report, and like always, it's very concerning for me when I hear that people are not actually reading. And the whole idea of this activity is for you guys to read. And I'm looking at the selections of books that you made, and they look pretty good. You got some good stuff there that you're supposed to be enjoying. Make sure that you complete your reading this week because Friday morning, or at least the day before, I'm supposed to begin receiving your work. Don't send it late because it's for Friday. The work originally was scheduled for Thursday, so I'm giving you like an extra day, but that extra day does not include like Saturday or Sunday or the weekend. You send it late, I take points away because it's late. And that should not be the case. You've had months and months and months to take care of business. I know that chances are that some of you are done already. You're ready to do your thing right now, but you don't have to until Friday. Any questions about what's going to happen? What's supposed to be happening on Friday? Anybody? Last week we began with an introduction to the works of Edgar Allan Poe, and we gave you a brief biography of his very tragic and torturous life, but also we spoke about the great legacy that this giant of American literature left behind. As we told you before, Edgar Allan Poe was not only a man that was an author of horror and popularized the genre and took it to new literary heights, but he also popularized the format of the short story. That is quite a feat because during his time it was not very popular. What was mostly popular was reading a novel instead of reading a short story. In addition to that, he single-handedly invented the genre of mystery, also known as the detective story, that served as the inspiration for many of the great literary giants that wrote in that particular genre, like Arthur Conan Doyle and Agatha Christie. He created the character of a detective that uses deductive reasoning to solve his cases. Like in the case of C. Auguste Dupin, who is the detective and the protagonist of The Murders in the Rue Morgue, the very first mystery short story ever written. And that served like a template for other characters such as Sherlock Holmes, Mrs. Marple, and Hercule Poirot, right? Which are famous detectives in that genre. Um, he was also a famous liter- um, literary critic. He particularly belonged to a school known as the Pragmatic School. That's something I did not mention before. There are different schools of literary criticism. Now, when we talk about literary criticism, what exactly are we talking about? Well, I'm going to be telling you in a brief moment, but that is what we will be doing as we read several of the works of Edgar Allan Poe. Um, so let us begin. And there's a documentary that you guys could have seen if you downloaded this presentation and clicked on this image, right? There's a brief or a very short biography from the A&E channel from cable. And it's brief and pretty informative. It's not exhaustive, but it gives you a good idea as good an idea as the presentation that I made last week about his life. So you were supposed to see that. And before we move on, I would like for you to speak your mind by reacting to the following statement. You've probably heard this many times before, that no man is an island, right? What can you tell me about that? Have you heard it before? No man is an island. Okay, it's surrounded by water. which means that it is isolated, that it's all by itself. So when we say that no man is an island, um, God created us to be by ourselves. Are we supposed to be lone wolves? Which is a strange thing because wolves walk around in packs. You know that, right? But a lone, when you hear the term lone wolf, that's an abnormality. That is not normal. Um, and I'm not talking about people spending some time alone. I'm not talking about that either. I'm talking about an attitude, about a way of living life. Are we supposed to live our lives separated from everybody else with no relationships? We are social beings. We're social creatures. We crave companionship. We crave uh, being with our equals, being other people like we are. That's why you guys belong to a clique. That's why you guys look for friends. That's why you guys look for relationship. We are social beings. That is normal. Um, we're not meant to live life by our lonesome. Again, that does not mean I said that. That does not mean that you will not spend some time alone. We need sometimes to spend some time, but to live our entire lives alone, like separated, like in isolation, that's no way for a person to live life. And this saying conveys the idea that also the people around us have a strong influence upon our ideas and our actions. Since we do not live in that isolation, we absorb like a sponge from our environment, the people that are around us. We absorb things. Um, we absorb thoughts. We absorb attitudes. I mean, think of the story that we recently read. No, the interlopers. The interlopers, these guys hated each other. They absorbed that from their family. It was taught to them. Okay, that's not something that they were born hating each other. They didn't even know each other. Poe's life was impacted by other people, by people around him. That's why I'm bringing this up. Poe did not live in an isolation, even though he probably had issues with abandonment. Because I mean, when you're an orphan, that's something that you have. Children that spend little time with their parents have issues like that, right? With issues of abandonment. Um, and the people that he cared most about died on him. So these events created by and circumstances created by other human beings that surrounded Edgar Allan Poe, we think are going to impact his work. When we talk of literary criticism, which is what we're going to be doing today, literary criticism is a way of better understanding literary works of art. We get to look at them with a particular lens and we can understand and comprehend it better and manage it better. There are at least 7 different types of literary criticism, or there are seven different approaches to literary criticism. One of them would be the oldest one, probably is mimetic. I think it was created by the Greek philosopher Aristotle. And mimetic literary criticism basically studies how art or literary art represents or imitates real life, because art is supposed to represent real life also, right? Um, so, how close is it to life? Another approach to understanding literary works of art will be pragmatic. And that's the school that Edgar Allan Poe belonged to. Remember that he was always looking for how his works affected people. So he thought that the value that his work had was based upon how effective it was in touching people a certain way, how it worked out. That's what pragmatism is all about, how things work out. Um, Another approach is called the expressive approach. And this one is used a lot in, it's seen a lot when people are criticizing poetry. Uh, this school looks at how art expresses ideas, beliefs, and values of the authors. Another approach to literary criticism is the objective approach that views art as autonomous, like something that is set apart, that is self-contained, and is separated from the world. So it looks at the work itself without connecting it to anything else. There's also the historical approach. This is also known as high criticism, and it is used mostly with ancient texts. These texts that we find in history, like parts of the Bible, the Code of Hammurabi, all these ancient texts, what is applied to it is what we know as historical literary criticism or high literary criticism. There's also the didactic approach that emphasizes the educational value of the work because it is didactic. It has to do with teaching. And finally, there's the approach that we're going to be using. And as I told you before, we're going to be using the biographical approach. And the biographical approach stresses the relationship between the author's life and his work. Basically, what we're going to try to do here is see how knowing Edgar Allan Poe's life will affect our understanding of the work that he produced. Having studied Poe's life, uh, the connection between his work and his life should become a little bit more apparent and help you understand his works better. We're going to be approaching two documents today. I would not call this a work of literature because this is not really a novel or a short story or something that requires the imagination. The first piece that you're going to be reading is the letter to John Allan. Remember who John Allan was? Anybody? Who was John Allan? He was the foster parent or the foster father of Edgar Allan Poe. He was this rich guy from Richmond, Virginia, that raised him up when he was a young child. And we read about a little. I told you a little bit about their relationship, right? It was very stressed relationship, particularly when Poe was a teenager. And this is a letter that he sent to John Allan from college when he was a college student and he was gambling. Remember, I told you he was gambling, and it is dated March 19, 1827. So it's a very interesting letter. I think it casts a lot of light into not only the relationship that they had, but also into the mindset of Edgar Allan Poe, which I find him to be whiny and entitled in this letter. But you're gonna read it. First time I read it, I was like laughing my butt off because I thought it was so funny. Uh, you can see how dramatic Edgar was. He was a very dramatic guy. Have you heard the term drama queen? So chances are you're going to see that in this letter. In addition to that letter, you're also going to be reading a poem. And I think that this poem titled Alone is probably the most representative of Edgar Allan Poe's psyche. I mean, in every poem that he wrote, you're gonna find bits and pieces of his mind, of his mindset, of his worldview. But I think that no other poem more than this one represents or gives us an idea of how he saw himself. It's pretty sad. It's pretty dark poem that you will be reading. You're going to be reading Alone, and you're going to be reading those two works. Where I skipped the Raven. I thought that during our situation, reading the Raven would not be a good idea. So you're gonna in this chart you see something that says the Raven. You can skip that. Is that clear? Don't be asking me later on what do you do there because I'm already telling you now where it says the Raven in that chart. You're not gonna do anything. Is that clear? Okay. So the Raven, in case you did not know it, I'm gonna just mention a few facts about the Raven, but we're not gonna go and read it. If you want to read it, it's in the internet. We read it every year, but the Raven is considered, and it's not in the book. But I've been using the Raven for years in this class. As a matter of fact, before we went to this lesson, we were supposed to have read the Raven, and the Raven is one of the most famous American novels. I'm sorry, American poems ever written. Excuse me, got a dry throat. The poem is definitely Edgar Allan Poe's most famous poem. It is considered one of the greatest American poems, and some people call it the most horrifying poem ever written. Now, what does horrifying mean? Or terrifying? If you're expecting to see goblins and monsters and werewolves and creatures and vampires and the mummy and stuff like that, that's not what it deals about. It deals with real life horrors. Remember that these monsters that we see in Gothic literature are not real. We talk about Chucky, we talk about Freddy Krueger, we talk about Candyman, we talk about any of these any of these guys, Annabelle the doll or whatever, or the nun. You find that stuff scary? Does that scare you? So you find that stuff scary? Exactly. You have real life and there's scary stuff. They're the monsters in real life. Those are the ones that are very scary. Like losing a loved one. That's a real life horror. Losing your job, especially in the middle of a pandemic and economic depression that we're heading towards. Going to a doctor and hearing the doctor telling you you got stage 4 cancer, or hearing your husband or your wife tell you, I don't love you anymore. I want a divorce. I mean, no Freddy Krueger, no nun, no demon no Frankenstein can stand up to that. Those are real life horrors. And The Raven deals with a real life horror, one of the greatest horrors. It deals with the loss of the last thing that a human being should lose. It's the Raven tells a story about this. It's not a story; it's a poem, but it's narrative, and it is highly effective. It's about this guy who apparently lost his wife, Leonore, and he's sitting in a study reading books to try to forget her in a winter night. He's all by himself. He's alone, which is something else that is scary in real life, being by yourself. Because, as I said, we're social beings, and he receives a visit. There's something knocking on his door. Then he finds nothing there. Then it's knocking at his window. He opened the window, and in comes a raven. And a raven is a big black bird. Some people think it's a crow, but it's just bigger than a crow. And he starts having a conversation with this bird that flies into his studio, his living room, and perches itself on top of the statue of goddess Athena, Pallas Athena. And he starts having this conversation. It's more like a monologue, but the this raven responds to his questions with always with the same word, and the word is nevermore. Nevermore. You know what nevermore means, right? Nevermore is like saying never, ever, 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 ever. That's basically what nevermore means. It's like the shortest version of never, ever, 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 ever. So that's the answer that the bird is always giving him. And he's asking him questions about his wife who died. He's asking questions about his future. And the answers that he gets are like horrible answers. Like, imagine asking someone, will I ever see my wife in heaven again? And to hear a bird tell you nevermore, how would that make you feel? I mean, it's horrible. Like, no, like, am I gonna hold my wife in heaven? No. What does that mean? What does nevermore mean? Like, no mean like that. I'm not going to heaven, or that she died in heaven. You see what I'm saying? It's a terrifying poem. Um, he's asking if he will receive consolation in heaven. If he will. He says, "Is there balm in Gilead?" In other words, what that means is, am I going to receive comfort in heaven? And to hear the bird say nevermore, like no, that's terrifying. And this poem deals with the loss of the last thing that a human being should lose. What's the last thing that a human being should lose, in your opinion? Don't say my cell phone, okay? My cell phone. No, not your cell phone. No, no. There are things that the last thing that a person, guys, you're gonna die one day. So you're going to lose your life. But while you live, there is the last thing that you want, that you don't want to let go. What's that thing? They will die too, guys. Your loved ones are going to die too. Sorry to tell you, but yeah, it's something that is supposed to be inside of you. What's the last thing that? What? Your memories. Yeah, I know that sucks. Alzheimer and dementia sucks. But what? Who said that? Amaya. Thank you. The last thing that what keeps you going when the going gets rough and tough? What's that thing that keeps you going and going and going? Is it not hope? Is it not hope that tomorrow will be a better day that keeps you going? What happens when people lose hope? They do crazy stuff. You know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah, so since this poem deals with hopelessness, that's not something I wanted you guys reading in the middle of this pandemic. So I don't want them reading. We can read it another moment, right? We can deal with it, but I don't think that we're equipped to deal with that now. And I said, nah, skip that. I'm not going to read that. I'm not going to have the kids read that. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I wandered weak and weary. No, 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 skip that, guys. Not. So I said, no, not this year. If you want to read it, it's out there. You can even hear Edward. You can even hear James Earl Jones read it in his very beautiful basso voice on YouTube. Or Christopher Lee, read it, or Christopher Walken, read it for you on YouTube. But that's if you want to read it, that's on you. But I'm not going to impose that on you. I'm not going to read The Raven to you guys. I think we need a little bit more sunshine in our life. Would you agree with me? I think right. That's how I feel. So I decided this year. Now I'm going to skip The Raven. So I'm just giving you an explanation of what you are not reading, right, and why. But you will be reading alone. and you will be reading the letter to John Allen because it's hilarious. At least I found it hilarious. So as you read him, I want you to compare the works of this one author. This is part of literary criticism. You're going to be comparing these two works, not the Raven. Where it says the Raven, you can put NA, which means not applicable because we're skipping it this year. Unless, again, you want to read it and you want to do it. But that's up to you. I'm not imposing upon you, okay? And what you're going to be reading is, comparing is the connection of that work to his life, to the traditions of that time, that's the early 1800s, and the author's attitudes. I already did the one for Letter to John Allen for you. Do the one for Alone, so that way you can compare the works, right? You're going to be reading the selections on pages 276 to 283, and there's an applying your skills section on page 284 that should be accompanied by that chart that you see there. And that will basically be today's work. In our next meeting, we're going to be engaging a short story titled The Cask of Amontillado, which is very creepy, very creepy, but it doesn't deal with hopelessness, uh, right? So, guys, any question before I cut you loose? Okay, guys, you were awfully quiet today. Be safe. Tomorrow is not a day to be out there in our current political climate. To tomorrow's election day, stay home, be safe, and you take care of each other. All right? I'll see you in a couple of days. God bless you.